the only thing holding us back from planting more churches faster is people saying, here I am, send me. So Damaris grew up in a dysfunctional home. Her father left when she was very young, and he only came back around the house when he wanted things, when he was looking for things. And if anybody in the house, if any of the kids or even the wife or the ex-wife would step out of line, in his opinion, he would beat them physically. And Damaris shares growing up in this environment and remembering or learning that in order for her to survive, she had to weather the storm of her father's wrath, and it was best if she would apologize for whatever she did wrong, take responsibility, swear to never do it again, and just kind of wait out the storm. She tells a story about when she was 7 years old where she was in her room and she was being beaten by her dad, and she realized for the first time that her mom was in the room with her. She doesn't remember ever seeing that before, but this was the first time of many times where she was standing over the other side with her arms crossed and watching as her daughter got beat. And so she was experiencing this and realizing that I need to weather the storm, I need to say I'm sorry, I need to admit that I did something wrong, and my mom's not going to defend me. She's 7 years old. So she grows up in this environment. So we can't be surprised that at the age of 17, she moves in with the first guy that would show her some affection. Okay? So she moves in with this guy, and she's 17 years old. The next year she turns 18, she finds out she's pregnant. Okay? So she's scared about this. She doesn't know what to do. She's just a little girl, basically, a little young teenager, young woman. And she talks to her boyfriend about the fact that she's pregnant, and he said, well, you got to get an abortion. That's the only way out of this. And so she agrees, and she doesn't want to, but he's in charge, and this is kind of the way it goes. So she goes and gets an abortion. After the abortion, she falls into a major depression because she just feels gross and evil and guilty and just really goes into a bad situation. Well, she turns 19, and another year later, she gets pregnant again. This time she's a little bit hesitant to talk about it with the boyfriend because of the last experience. So she kind of delays it a little bit, and she finally confesses to him that she's pregnant. She's far enough along that he gets upset, and he beats her for the first time in the relationship. And that just triggered her to go back into her response. Okay, I'm sorry, I did something wrong. I need to apologize for what I did wrong. I need to fix the problem and weather the storm. So she goes and gets a second abortion. Okay? So now she turns 20 years old. She gets pregnant a third time. And this time she is so riddled with guilt that she doesn't want to tell him, so she just doesn't say anything. Well, she starts to show, and he beats her, tells her to go get an abortion. And so I want to ask each of you that are in this room, try to put yourself in her shoes. What do you do? Do you get the abortion, or do you stand your ground? I hope none of us grew up in that environment. But I think we can all come to the conclusion that we probably would say, well, we'd probably go ahead and get the abortion. It's not a small miracle that she decided to flee. So she flies back to Peru. They were living in Costa Rica at the time. She flies back to Peru to escape the wrath. She gives birth to this little girl. Her name is Tiara. And if we can actually go to the next slide, please. Okay, just hang on right there. Yeah, so I got a little bit ahead of myself. These are our 40/40s. Let's go to the next slide. So this is Damaris with her daughter Tiara, and then she had another daughter a couple years later, Iji. And so there she is in the picture. And she's living in Peru, and things are okay. She's a single mom, she's young. She's trying to make ends meet, and this guy keeps coming around every once in a while, terrorizing and beating her from time to time, and just really controlling her life even from a distance. Well, Damaris meets two young ladies, if we go to the next slide. This is Brenda and Sheena. Brenda is from North Peru, and Sheena is from Seattle, Washington. They are 40/40s. Raise your hand if you know what a 40/40 is. Okay, maybe not everybody here knows what a 40/40 is. Okay, well, for those of you who don't know what a 40/40 is, a 40/40 is a missionary. It's our main strategy for planting churches. So we've been looking for 6 years now, we've been looking for North American single adults, males and females, to partner up with South American missionaries, males and females. So a North American guy, would partner up with a North American or a South American guy, and those two would go out and they would start cell groups, and they would do evangelism campaigns, and they would do discipleship, and they would raise up leaders, all with the effort to build and plant a church, okay? So Brenda and Sheena are out about in this work. They're starting cell groups. And so they meet Dominice, and they begin to work with her. And I remember the first Sunday that Dominice came to church, it was as a result of a VBS. And actually, my kids invited her kids, and that's how she came to church the first time. And so it's the end of the VBS, the kids do their program, everybody's laughing and giggling and clapping and everything, you know. And then I preach in that Sunday, and then I do the invite for people to come forward to accept Christ as their Savior, as we did every single week. In the 85 weeks that I preached in our church plant in Arequipa, there were only 5 where people didn't come forward to accept Christ as their Savior. It's incredible. Mm-hmm. So I remember this Sunday that we are, I'm preaching and I do the invite, and normally in Peru, I have learned Peruvians are very quiet and kind of humble and respectful and not really outgoing or flamboyant in general. And normally when I'm preaching, I need to give the altar call 4 times before somebody's brave enough to raise their hand and then come forward. And then everybody else kind of feels comfortable to come down and do the prayer, right? Well, I remember this Sunday because on the first invitation, Dominice stood up. Yeah. I need Jesus. She came down and she prayed the sinner's prayer, and a bunch of people prayed and accepted Christ that day. And that was the first time that I had met Dominice. But Brenda and Sheena began to work with her. And in our church plants, we asked all of our people to begin discipleship classes. And we want them to learn the Bible. And that's what the job of the 4040s is. And so Dominice begins to go through her classes, and she's progressing great. She's coming to most of the classes and learning and getting along. She graduates discipleship, and she begins leadership classes, and she's going all the way through that. We get to the subject of baptism, and she kind of hesitates a little bit. She's not really sure about baptism. And I went in and asked her about that. Why are you not sure about baptism? No pressure. I'm not going to force this something you have to decide to do, but help me understand. And she just said, I just don't think God can forgive me for the things that I've done. And I want you to just think about things from her perspective. Remember, she's always made mistakes, right? Everything she did was wrong. Everything she did deserved a beating. And she always had to apologize later. So getting baptized, that's probably something that's going to bring some wrath from somebody. Because I'm doing something for myself. And I'm not worthy. And I just shared with her as her pastor. None of us are worthy. That's the point. That's why Christ came. That's why he traded his life for your life. And getting baptized is just a symbol of what you have decided to do. No longer follow the ways of the world and begin to follow the ways of Jesus Christ. So she decided to get baptized, and I'm so thankful we have a picture of that day. If you could show that picture. This is the day that Dominice got baptized. Look at her face. I showed that picture to her later, and she goes, Papa Brian. She calls me Papa Brian. She said, Papa Brian, I think that's because I was afraid of going into cold water. and I said, no, I was there. I remember the emotion of the moment. So she's getting she gets baptized, and she just continues on in her track, and she's going through leadership training. She gets done with leadership training, and she knows that her job now is to go and do for others what the 4040s did for her, right? And so she wants to open a cell group, and she's all excited, and she goes to her neighbor's house. If we could show the next picture. This is a picture of her at her neighbor Nora's house. This is Nora over here on this side. And she goes up to Nora and says, Nora, I want to open a cell group. Can we open a cell group in your house? And Nora says, sure, yeah, you can open a cell group in my house. And then Dominique says, and I need a Timothy. Will you be my Timothy? Okay, so I have a question. Does anybody here know what the heck I'm talking about when I say I need a Timothy? Garen.
Just like, you want me to come over?
No, just
Just like Paul had Timothy as someone to go out to the cities where he couldn't go. Okay. She needed someone to do that for her.
Okay. So yeah, it's a biblical reference to Paul's relationship with Timothy, where Paul identified a young leader, trained them to do what he did, and then sent them out to duplicate his work. Okay. So we teach all of our leaders to do that, make Timothys. So she says, Nora, will you be my Timothy? And Nora says, well, maybe I can be your Timothy. What's a Timothy? And Dominique says, I don't know. So apparently she missed that part of the class, or missed that whole class. I'm not sure what the deal was, but we had to go back and re-explain it. But isn't it awesome to think about having such new leaders that they have questions like that, but that they're on fire for what God is doing in their life? Now, I want to back up one slide. I want you to look at this little girl. This is Tiara. Look at what she's looking at. And think about what Dominique was looking at when she was 7. Mm-hmm. And when I say change hearts to change the world, somebody might be cynical and say, change the world. Well, we're changing her world. We're changing her world. Let's go to the next slide again. Go back. And look at her other daughter. She's watching her mom make leaders. We're changing her. And if these people will do for others what the 4040s did for them, they're going to change that community. And if that community gets changed, that community is going to impact another community. And the churches are going to begin to send missionaries out to the other areas. And we used to say all the time in the church plant, let's conquer Arequipa for Christ. And then when we're done with that, let's conquer Tacna, which is the town over. When we're done with that, we'll conquer Peru. When we're done with that, we'll conquer South America. When we're done with that, we'll look around the ocean. But we have to be willing to be obedient to the commandment that God has given us to go and make disciples. That make disciples. That make disciples. That make disciples. Let's go to the next slide. Oh, backwards. Okay, so I shared one story about one woman and one pair of 4040s, and that was not the only woman that the Brenda and Sheena had an impact on. This is a picture. It was one of our last moments in our church plant in Arequipa. This is one church plant of 82 churches that we've planted over the years. And the people seated in the front row are almost all of our leaders that were raised up by 4040s. So the number of 4040s are in the back row, and a couple of people, like her, didn't follow instructions. She should have been in the front row, but all the people in the back row raised up those leaders that are in the front row. And I just saw a picture from our 2nd year anniversary. We'd been gone for 6 months. The sanctuary was totally full. And I see all these little faces in there. And I've heard stories about them baptizing their own disciples that I haven't even met. And we talk about changing hearts and changing the world. Is that awesome? What? God has given us a commandment to go and make disciples. Okay, next slide. So the reason why I am here tonight is to share with you that we want to send people out to change hearts and change the world. We're looking for accountants. We need accountants. We need 2 full-time accountants right now. We need young single adults that are called to go to the field and help plant churches, change hearts, and change the world. We need young single adults to come right here to Boise, Idaho, and help us cast a vision and go out and find more 4040s to send them out. Sometimes I have people come up to me and say, hey, Brian, what's the biggest need that you have in your ministry? And I think that they're thinking money, which money is always a need. We never have enough. There's always more bills to pay than there is cash to pay it. But our number one need is for people to raise their hand and say, here I am, send me. And I say a statement without any hesitation that the only thing holding us back from planting more churches faster is people saying, here I am, send me. It's not money, it's not energy, it's not desire. It's just people being obedient to the call. So my challenge to you tonight is to look at that card on the back side of the card. If you feel like that God has prompted you to make a move outside of maybe what you logically might think, but just you feel like God is inviting you to do something, I want you to fill out your name, your address, phone number, email address, and where you think God might be leading you to go. And I'll give you a call, we'll sit down for coffee. It's not an obligation of any kind. We're just going to sit down and talk about maybe what God's doing in your life. Thank you very much. God bless you.